Welcome back to Untold Revenge Files. Today, the story you're about to hear takes place in Crestfield, Pennsylvania. My name is Alara Vance. I'm 23 years old, and 3 years ago, my parents left me alone in a hospital bed after emergency surgery because my younger brother had a basketball game. Let me say that again so it really sinks in. I was lying in a recovery ward, still groggy from anesthesia, a fresh surgical scar running down my abdomen, tubes snaking into my arm, monitors beeping beside me in a cold room that smelled like antiseptic and abandonment. And my parents, Gerald and Maureen Vance, chose to drive 45 minutes to a high school gymnasium to watch my younger brother, Troy, play a regular season basketball game. Not playoffs, not a championship, not a state final. A Tuesday night game in November. But I need to take you back further than that night, because this didn't start in that hospital room. That room was just where the knife finally went deep enough for me to stop pretending it didn't hurt. Growing up in Crestfield, I was the older child, the daughter, the quiet one, the girl who got straight A's, never talked back, braided her own hair for school pictures because her mom was too busy, worked a part-time job at a local bakery starting at 15, and never once asked my parents for anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. I was the kind of daughter teachers called mature beyond her years, and a pleasure to have in class. And for a long time, I wore those words like armor. I thought being responsible made me valuable. I thought being easy made me loved. What I didn't understand, not for years, was that being easy just made me easy to forget. Troy was born when I was 6. And listen, I loved my brother. I genuinely did. He was a chubby baby with big brown eyes and a laugh that filled up every room. And I used to carry him around the house like he was the most precious thing in the world. I changed his diapers. I fed him bottles at night when my mom was too exhausted. I was 6 years old playing mother to a newborn because that's what good daughters do. But somewhere between his first steps and his first basketball tryout, something shifted in our house. Troy was loud. Troy was athletic. Troy had this electric energy that turned heads, and my parents orbited him like he was the center of the universe. Every dinner conversation revolved around Troy's games, Troy's stats, Troy's coaches, Troy's potential scholarship. My dad, Gerald, had played college ball himself, 2 seasons at a Division II school before a knee injury ended everything, and he saw Troy as his redemption story. He built a half-court in the backyard. He drove Troy to AAU tournaments 3 states away. He recorded every single game on 2 different devices. My mom, Maureen, became the team mom. She organized fundraisers, designed custom t-shirts, sat front row at every game with homemade poster board signs, her voice completely gone by halftime from screaming his name. And me? I was there too, somewhere in the background, like a lamp nobody remembers to turn on. I remember one time, I was 16, and I had gotten accepted into an advanced dual enrollment program at the community college for biomedical sciences. It was competitive. Only 12 students from the whole county were selected. I came home with the acceptance letter clutched in both hands, my heart hammering because I was so incredibly proud. I walked into the kitchen where my mom was on the phone and held the letter up like a little kid showing a drawing. She glanced at it, gave me a quick thumbs up without reading a single word, and went right back to her call. She was coordinating a carpool schedule for Troy's away game that weekend. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, holding that letter in the air, waiting for someone to put it on the fridge. Nobody ever did. I found it 3 days later on the kitchen counter, underneath a pizza box, with a coffee ring stained across the college's letterhead. Before I tell you exactly what happened the night everything shattered, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far this story will travel. Now, let me tell you about the night of November 14th. I'd been having stomach pain for about 2 days. Sharp, stabbing, relentless pain on my lower right side that would come in waves and leave me gripping the edge of whatever was closest. I ignored it at first because that's what I'd been trained to do my entire life. Don't complain. Don't make a fuss. Don't be dramatic. Handle it. You're the strong one. But by Tuesday afternoon, I was doubled over behind the counter at the bakery, sweat beading across my forehead, barely able to breathe through the pain. My boss, a kind older woman named Ruth Calloway, took one look at my face and said, "Sweetheart, you're white as flour. I'm taking you to the emergency room right now." Ruth drove me to Crestfield Memorial. They ran blood work, did a CT scan. My white blood cell count was dangerously elevated. Appendicitis, and it was on the verge of rupturing. They needed to operate. That night. No waiting, emergency surgery. I called my mom from the pre-op area with trembling fingers. I was 20 years old, lying on a gurney in a thin hospital gown, and I was terrified. The nurse was already inserting my IV. I could hear the surgical team prepping instruments behind the curtain. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. "Mom," I said, fighting to keep my voice from cracking. "I'm at the hospital. They said my appendix might burst. They're taking me into surgery right now." There was a pause. A long, terrible pause. "Tonight?" she asked. "Yes, Mom, tonight. Like, they're prepping me right now." Another pause. And then I heard it. My father's voice in the background. Not whispering, not even trying to be subtle. "Troy's game starts at 7. The scout from Ridgemont is supposed to be there. We cannot miss warm-ups, Marine." My mother came back on the line. Her voice shifted into that careful, measured, diplomatic tone she always used when she'd already made a decision and was just packaging it nicely. "Alara, honey, appendix surgery is very routine. Thousands of people have it every single day. You'll be in and out before you know it. Dad and I will come first thing in the morning to see you, okay? Troy has his game tonight, and you know how important these scout visits are for his future." My throat closed. Not from the anesthesia, not from the pain, from something that cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. "Mom, I'm going into surgery. I'm alone. And you'll be absolutely fine. You're strong, Alara. You've always been the strong one. We'll bring you breakfast tomorrow morning, okay? Your favorite muffins from Donaldson's." She hung up. She actually hung up. I lay there on that gurney, staring at the ceiling, the fluorescent light buzzing above me like a timer, counting down to something I couldn't name. A nurse named Diane noticed the expression on my face and gently asked if my family was on their way. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because the truth was a shape my tongue couldn't form and my heart couldn't hold. They wheeled me into the operating room alone. No hand to squeeze, no familiar face to focus on before the world went dark. Just me and the beeping machines and the cold, sterile air and the quiet, devastating understanding that I had never been the priority. Not once, not ever. Not even when my body was being cut open. When I woke up 3 hours later, groggy and nauseated and sore and disoriented, I reached for my phone on the bedside table with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. One text from my mother. One single text message. "Surgery go okay? Troy scored 22 points. See you tomorrow, sweetie." 22 points. Exclamation marks. A basketball emoji. A celebration emoji. For a Tuesday night game. I stared at that text until the screen timed out and went black. Then I set the phone face down on the mattress, turned my body toward the wall, and pressed my face into the stiff hospital pillow. Something inside me, something I'd been holding together with prayers and patience and desperate hope for 20 years, quietly and completely broke apart. I had no idea that the next 72 hours would finally push me past every limit I had and change everything about who I was willing to be. They came the next morning, both of them, like it was a social call. My dad walked in first, carrying a paper bag from Donaldson's bakery and wearing his Crestfield Hawks hoodie. My mom followed with a small bouquet of flowers, the kind you grab from a bucket at the gas station, plastic wrap still crackling around the stems. They were smiling, relaxed, casual, like they were visiting me at college, not at a hospital where I'd had emergency surgery 12 hours ago without a single family member present. "Hey, Pumpkin," Gerald said, dropping the bakery bag on my tray table with a thud. "Brought your favorite, blueberry muffins. How you feeling?" I looked at them. Really, truly looked at them. My mother was already arranging the gas station flowers in a plastic water cup, humming under her breath, fussing with the stems like this was a Pinterest project. My father was already pulling out his phone, probably queuing up Troy's game highlights. "You didn't come," I said. My mom paused. Her hand stopped moving for exactly 1 second. Then she smiled that careful, practiced smile and resumed arranging. "Alara, sweetheart, we talked about this on the phone. The surgery was completely routine. I even called the nurses station after, and they confirmed everything went perfectly. See, you were fine, just like I said." "I was alone, Mom." "Honey, you were asleep for most of it. You wouldn't have even known we were there." "I knew you weren't." My dad settled into the visitor chair, unwrapping his own muffin, completely unbothered. "Your brother had an unbelievable game, by the way. 22 points, 8 assists, 2 steals. Coach Davis said the Ridgemont Scout was taking notes the entire second half." I felt my chest tighten, not from the surgical incision, from something heavier, something that had been pressing down on my ribs for my entire life and had finally become too heavy to bear. "Dad, I had emergency surgery." He looked up from his muffin, chewing, and shrugged one shoulder. "And you're fine, Alara. Look at you, sitting up, talking, colors coming back. You Vance women are tough." They stayed for 45 minutes. My mother talked about Troy's game for 30 of them. She told me about the halftime score, the other team's coach getting a technical foul, the funny thing Troy said during a timeout. My dad actually played me a 3-minute video of Troy's fourth quarter run on his phone, holding it up to my face while I lay there with an IV in my arm and stitches in my abdomen. They replayed my brother's basketball highlights at my hospital bedside, like we were sitting in the living room and I was just another spectator at the Troy Vance show. Not once did either of them ask me what the surgery was like. Not once did they ask if I had been scared. Not once did they ask who had driven me to the hospital or who had sat with me before they wheeled me away. When they left, my mom kissed my forehead and patted my arm. "Get some rest, okay, honey? And don't milk this too long. You've got your shift at the bakery this weekend, right?" She laughed softly like it was a gentle joke between us. It wasn't gentle, and it wasn't a joke. That afternoon, a few people actually checked on me. Ruth, my boss from the bakery, called twice and sent a small care package with the hospital's front desk. My coworker, a girl named Nadia Okafor, stopped by after her shift with a bag of snacks and a paperback novel she thought I'd like. She sat with me for 2 solid hours, talking about nothing important, just being present. And then Troy texted. Not to ask how I was doing, not to say he was sorry he wasn't there, to ask if I'd seen his game highlights on the school's Instagram page. I didn't respond. When I was discharged 2 days later, I went back to my parents' house to recover. My old bedroom. My narrow twin bed with the lavender comforter I'd had since middle school. I moved slowly up the stairs, still sore, still stitched, clutching the railing with one hand and my bag of discharge papers and prescriptions in the other. I came through the living room and stopped dead. The room was decorated. Streamers, balloons, a banner stretched across the fireplace mantel in blue and gold letters that read, "Congrats, Troy! 22 points!" My mom had baked a full sheet cake, a basketball drawn in orange frosting, candles. Not for me. For a Tuesday night basketball game. I stood in that doorway, holding my hospital discharge papers against my chest, staring at that banner. And something inside me, something I'd been negotiating with and reasoning with and begging for patience from for months and years and maybe my entire conscious life, finally went silent. I walked upstairs without saying a word. I sat on the edge of my twin bed, and I did something I had never allowed myself to do before. I opened the notes app on my phone, and I started writing. Not a letter to them, not an apology for being upset. A list. Every single time I had been second. The engineering acceptance letter under the pizza box. My high school graduation, where they left early because Troy had a stomach ache. The time I won a regional science fair, and my dad forgot to pick me up from the venue, and I waited in an empty parking lot for 2 hours. The birthdays where my celebration was a card from the drugstore, and Troy's was a catered backyard party with a DJ and a bounce house. The parent-teacher conferences they skipped. The dance recitals they missed. The college application essays nobody helped me with. The tears nobody saw. I filled 4 screens, and at the very bottom, in capital letters, I wrote one sentence. I deserve more than this. That night, Nadia called to check on me. I told her everything, not just the hospital, all of it. 20 years of it. The favoritism, the invisibility, the banner over the fireplace. I talked for almost an hour straight, barely stopping to breathe, and she just listened. When I finally went quiet, exhausted and raw, she said something that I carry with me to this day. Alara, would you accept this from a stranger? If some random woman off the street treated you like this, would you keep showing up at her door hoping she'd finally see you? No. Then why are you accepting it from the woman who's supposed to love you more than anyone on this planet? I didn't have an answer, and that silence, that clean, empty silence, was the clearest thing I'd heard in 20 years. The next morning, I woke up sore and tired and swollen, but something fundamental had shifted. There was a stillness inside me that hadn't been there before. Not peace, not yet, not quite, but the absence of hope. And strangely, terrifyingly, beautifully, that absence felt like the first breath of freedom I'd ever taken. I was done auditioning for a role I was never going to be cast in. It was time to write my own story. I moved out 2 weeks later. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match in the kitchen, no slamming doors or throwing things. I waited until a Saturday morning when my parents were at Troy's travel tournament 3 hours away. I packed my entire life into 4 boxes and 2 duffel bags, loaded them into my dented silver Honda Civic, and drove away from the house I grew up in without looking back. I left a note on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker where my mom would find it first thing. Moving out. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. You never did. Maybe that last line was unnecessary. Maybe it was the most necessary thing I'd ever written. Nadia had a cousin, a woman named Simone Okafor, who was renting out the spare bedroom in her apartment on the east side of Crestfield. Simone was a nursing student, quiet and organized, and kind in the way that doesn't announce itself. The room was small, barely big enough for a bed and a desk, with a window that overlooked a parking lot and a laundromat. But the sheets were clean, the door locked, and nobody in that apartment had ever made me feel invisible. It was the first space that had ever felt like mine. Those first few weeks were brutal. I won't romanticize them. I was still healing from surgery, still sore when I moved too fast or laughed too hard. I was working shifts at the bakery, eating ramen and canned soup for dinner, counting quarters for laundry. There were nights, bad nights, when the silence in that little room pressed in from every direction, and I'd catch myself reaching for my phone. Wanting to call my mom, wanting to hear her voice, wanting to be told I was overreacting, because at least that meant she was paying attention. That gravitational pull toward the people who raised you. It doesn't care about logic or lists or truth. It just wants to go home. But home had never been a place for me. Home was supposed to be a feeling, and I'd spent 20 years searching for it in a house where it didn't exist. So I did the only thing that made sense. I poured myself into forward motion. I re-enrolled in the biomedical sciences program I'd started years ago, this time with full commitment and fire in my chest. I picked up extra shifts at the bakery and started saving every single dollar I didn't absolutely need for rent and food. I found a free fitness program online and started running every morning at 5:30, before the sun came up, before the city woke up, when the streets were empty and the air was cold, and the only voice I could hear was my own breathing, telling me I was still here, still going, still alive. Not to look good, not to make anyone regret losing me, because the discipline was medicine. When everything inside felt like it was crumbling, the rhythm of my feet on pavement and the ache in my muscles reminded me that I had a body, I had a life, and I was the one steering it now. Months passed. I got a promotion at the bakery to shift supervisor with a raise. I started tutoring biology and chemistry to other students in my program for extra income. I built a small, fierce circle of people who showed up without being begged. Nadia, who texted me every single morning without fail. Simone, who left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror that said things like, "You're doing amazing," and "Eat breakfast today, please." A professor named Dr. Ananya Shah, who noticed my work ethic and became a mentor, writing recommendation letters, connecting me with research opportunities, treating me like someone worth investing in. Have you ever rebuilt your entire life from the ground up and realized halfway through that the new foundation was stronger than anything you'd ever stood on before? That's exactly what it felt like pouring concrete into cracks I didn't even know existed, and watching something solid finally take shape beneath my feet. About 8 months after I moved out, I ran into someone unexpected at the grocery store. Jade Kimura, the older sister of Troy's girlfriend. We made awkward small talk in the cereal aisle, and then she said something that stopped me cold. "Your parents have been telling everyone you had some kind of emotional breakdown, that you just disappeared one night without any explanation." I set down the box in my hand slowly. A breakdown. Yeah, your mom told my mom at church that you got overwhelmed and needed space. She made it sound like you were fragile and unstable, not like she did anything wrong. I nodded slowly. Of course. Of course they rewrote the story. Of course the narrative was about my weakness, not their neglect. Of course my mother found a version of events that kept her comfortable and blameless. "How's Troy?" I asked. Not from bitterness, from genuine curiosity. He was still my brother, even if we'd never been close in the way siblings should be. Jade hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Honestly, not great. He didn't get the Ridgemont scholarship. His grades weren't anywhere near the academic requirement. Your dad was furious. I heard there was a massive blow-up at your house. And," she lowered her voice, "I think your parents kind of expected you to just come back after a couple of weeks. Like it was a phase. When you didn't, things started falling apart." "Falling apart how?" "Your mom told my mom she didn't realize how much you handled. Bills, groceries, cleaning, scheduling, fixing things, organizing everything. She said the house hasn't been the same since you left." I stood there in the cereal aisle of a grocery store on a Wednesday evening, holding a box of generic oat cereal, and felt something I genuinely did not expect. Not satisfaction, not victory, not vindication, just a bone-deep, exhausting sadness. They hadn't missed me. They'd missed my labor. They hadn't valued me as their daughter. They'd valued me as a function, a quiet machine that kept the household running. And when the machine walked out, they noticed the malfunction, not the person who'd been breaking down inside it for years. By the 1-year mark, my life looked nothing like the one I'd left behind. I'd completed my associate degree in biomedical sciences with honors. I'd been accepted into a paid research internship at a biotech lab in nearby Drayton, working under a team that treated my ideas like they mattered. I moved into my own studio apartment, small and sparse but mine, with a desk by the window where I'd study at night, while rain streaked down the glass and the city hummed below me like a lullaby. Through Jade and others, I heard that things at home had continued to unravel. Troy had lost his starting position on the team after a discipline issue involving missed practices. Gerald was drinking more, spending evenings alone in the garage with the door down. Maureen had started attending a women's support group at church, which, according to Jade, was the first time in her life that Maureen Vance had ever admitted she needed help with anything. Knowing all of that should have felt like justice, like the universe was finally settling the debt. Instead, it felt like standing at a safe distance and watching a house you once lived in slowly sink into soft ground. You don't cheer, you don't celebrate, you just stand there, remembering a time when you believed the walls were solid and the people inside loved you the way you needed to be loved. 2.5 years after I walked out of that house, I was sitting at a lab bench at Kerrigan Biotech in Drayton, reviewing data from a tissue regeneration study my team had been working on for 3 months. I was 23 years old. I had a steady position at a company that valued precision and curiosity. I had a small apartment I'd furnished slowly and intentionally, piece by piece, each item chosen by me and no one else. I had friends who remembered my birthday and showed up at my door with cake and candles without being reminded or guilted into it. I was preparing applications for a 4-year biomedical engineering program starting in the fall, with 2 strong recommendation letters already secured. Life wasn't perfect. It was never going to be. Some nights I still lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if my mother ever thought about that hospital room, wondering if she replayed my voice on that phone call the way I replayed her response, wondering if the silence between us ached for her the way it sometimes still ached for me, late at night, in the spaces between exhaustion and sleep. But the life I had was mine, and it was honest, and for the first time in 23 years, I didn't have to shrink to fit inside it. That's when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in over a year. Mom. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered. The lab was quiet around me, just the soft hum of equipment and the ticking of a wall clock. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then a text came through. Alara, it's Mom. Can we please talk? I really need to see you. It's important. I miss you so much, sweetheart. Please call me back. A year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, that text would have cracked me wide open. I would have called back within seconds, heart racing, already rehearsing how to comfort her, how to smooth everything over, how to fold myself back into the small, quiet shape she was comfortable with, how to be low maintenance again, how to be easy again, how to disappear again. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't respond that night. I sat with it, let it breathe. The next morning, I met Nadia for coffee at our usual spot, a tiny cafe near the university with mismatched chairs and good espresso. I showed her the text. She read it, set my phone down, and looked at me with steady eyes. What do you think she wants, Alara? I don't know. Maybe she's changed. Maybe something's wrong. Maybe she actually misses me. And what do you want? I wrapped both hands around my mug and stared into the foam. I want to not feel like a ghost in my own family. I want to be seen, not needed. Seen. Nadia nodded. She didn't push. She never pushed. She just sat with me in the question. 2 days later, I agreed to meet my mother. I chose a diner halfway between Crestfield and Drayton. Neutral ground, public space, somewhere neither of us had history or ownership. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered a coffee, and sat in a booth near the window where the late afternoon light came through in long golden bars. She walked in looking older, not dramatically, not shockingly, but in the accumulation of small things, the deepened lines around her eyes, the way her mouth held tension even when she was trying to smile, the slight forward curve of her shoulders, like she was carrying something invisible and heavy. She was wearing a blue cardigan I recognized from years ago, the one she used to wear on Sunday mornings, and the sight of it hit me somewhere unexpected. She sat down across from me, and her eyes immediately filled with tears. You look so good, Alara, she whispered, pressing a napkin to her face. You look so grown up, so beautiful. I am grown up, Mom. She nodded rapidly, dabbing her eyes, composing herself with visible effort. Then she started talking. She told me Troy had been struggling. His basketball career had effectively ended. He was working part-time at a tire shop and had dropped out of community college after one semester. Gerald had become withdrawn and bitter, spending most evenings alone in the garage, his blood pressure dangerously high, refusing to see a doctor regularly. The house was in disrepair. A pipe had burst last winter, and Gerald's attempt to fix it himself had caused water damage to the kitchen ceiling. The lawn was overgrown. Bills were piling up in a basket on the counter that nobody sorted through. She painted a picture of slow domestic collapse, and with every detail, she leaned a little further across the table, a little more toward me, like I was a rope and she was slipping. And then she got to the real reason she'd called. Alara, your father's health is getting worse. His doctor says he needs to manage his stress and his diet, but he won't listen to me or anyone. And the house, the bills, the appointments, Troy won't help, he barely comes home. Her voice broke. I can't manage all of it by myself. She reached across the table and took both of my hands in hers. Her fingers were cold, thinner than I remembered. I need you to come home, sweetheart, just for a little while, just to help us get back on our feet. You were always the one who held everything together. You were always the strongest one in this family. There it was, clear as glass, sharp as a scalpel. Not, I'm sorry I left you alone in a hospital room while they cut you open. Not, I'm sorry I chose a basketball game over your emergency surgery. Not, I'm sorry I spent 20 years making you feel invisible in your own home. Not, I'm sorry I told everyone you had a breakdown instead of telling them the truth. Just, we need your function back. Please return to your position. The machine is broken without you. I looked at my mother across that diner table. I looked at her tired eyes and her trembling chin and her cold, thin fingers wrapped around mine. And I loved her. That's the part people on the outside never understand about stories like this. You can love someone completely and still recognize that their love for you was conditional, rationed, and ranked. You can grieve the mother you needed while sitting across from the mother you got. You can hold both truths in your hands at the same time and still choose yourself. Mom, I said carefully, gently, with every ounce of compassion I had left. I love you. I genuinely hope Dad takes his health seriously. I hope Troy finds his direction. I really, truly do. Her face brightened, just for a second. A flicker of relief crossed her features. She thought this was a yes. But I'm not coming home. The flicker died. Alara, please. We're your family. You are, and I'm not taking anything from you. I'm not punishing you. But I spent 20 years being the person everyone leaned on and nobody looked at. I was lying in a hospital bed, Mom, 20 years old, emergency surgery, scared out of my mind, and you drove to a basketball game. Not the state championship, not a once-in-a-lifetime event, a regular Tuesday night game in November. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, her voice thin and defensive. That was one time, Alara. One time. No, Mom, it wasn't. That was every time. Every recital, every report card, every science fair, every birthday. Every single day, I made myself smaller so Troy could take up more space. The hospital was just the first time I finally let myself feel it instead of swallowing it. She broke down. Not the controlled, delicate tears from before. Something deeper and messier and more honest. The kind of crying that happens when a truth you've been running from for years finally catches you in a diner booth on a Wednesday afternoon and sits down across from you with your daughter's calm, steady eyes. I didn't look away. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't apologize. I just sat there and let the truth fill the space between us. Dad still has access to doctors. Troy is young and capable of stepping up. You have your church group, your neighbors, your community. I didn't take everything from you, Mom. I just stopped letting you take everything from me. She didn't respond for a long time. She held her untouched coffee cup and stared at the table. The diner sounds moved around us, plates clinking, a door chime, someone laughing at the counter. And then, very quietly, almost in a whisper, she said, "I didn't know it was that bad, Alara." "I know you didn't, Mom," I said, and that's the part that hurt the most. We sat together for a few more minutes in a silence that was neither comfortable nor hostile. It just was. I paid for both coffees, I walked her to the parking lot, I hugged her beside her car, and I meant it. It wasn't a cold hug, or a performative gesture, or a goodbye. It was real, full, warm. But it was also a line drawn in the air between us, invisible and unbreakable and necessary. I drove back to Drayton with the windows down. The air smelled like rain and cut grass and the tail end of autumn. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I just drove in the quiet and let myself feel the full weight and width of everything I'd been through and everything I'd become. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel like I'd won something or proved anything. I felt something quieter and more durable than any of those things. I felt peace. Here's what I've learned, what I want to leave with you. You can miss someone and still know they aren't safe for you. You can forgive someone without going back to the place where they hurt you. You can love your family from a distance that allows you to remain whole. Self-respect isn't a wall you build to keep people out. It's a foundation you pour to keep yourself standing when the ground shifts. I don't know if my parents will ever fully understand what they did. I don't know if my mother will tell people the truth or keep telling them I had a breakdown. I don't know if Troy and I will ever build a real relationship. I don't know if Gerald will take care of his health. And honestly, none of those things are mine to control. They never were. What's mine is this life. This apartment, this career, these friends who show up without being summoned. This version of me who doesn't shrink, who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who doesn't perform for an audience that never clapped. So after everything you've heard, if you were standing where I am now, with a parent asking you to come back and hold together the same house that never held space for you, would you go back and call it love? Or would you keep walking and call it self-respect? I already know my answer, and I think, somewhere deep down beneath the guilt and the obligation and the hope that maybe this time it'll be different, you know yours too. And that's where Lara's story ends. But I need to ask you something before you scroll past this. How many of you watching right now are the daughter who does everything? The one who remembers every appointment, organizes every gathering, holds every broken piece together with your bare hands, while nobody even asks if your hands are bleeding? How many of you are the girl who was told she was so mature and so strong and so independent, and didn't realize until years later that those words weren't compliments? They were permission slips. Permission for everyone around you to stop showing up because you'd handle it anyway. Because here's the truth that nobody in your family wants to say out loud. Being the strong one doesn't mean you don't break. It means nobody notices when you do. You are not a backup plan. You are not the emergency contact who never gets contacted in her own emergency. You are not the daughter who only gets called when something needs fixing. You are worthy of being chosen first. Not because of what you do, because of who you are. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you felt that knife twist when her mom sent a basketball emoji while Alara was lying alone in a hospital bed with stitches in her body and cracks in her heart, then do me a favor. Drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me if you've ever been the invisible daughter, the forgotten sister, the one who gives everything and gets a thumbs up and a gas station bouquet. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Untold Revenge Files and hit that notification bell, because every single week we bring you stories exactly like this one. Stories about people who were overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated, and who walked through the fire and came out forged into something unbreakable. Like this video if Alara made the right choice. Share it with the woman in your life who needs to hear this today. Your sister, your best friend, your daughter, yourself. And remember, your silence is not weakness. Your boundaries are not betrayal. Your peace is not up for negotiation. I'll see you in the next one.